The great crystal hall buzzed with the sounds of 1,000 different species. Ambassador Ketheva stood at the center podium, her blue skin shimmering under the artificial lights. Around her, beings from across the galaxy filled every seat. Some had wings, others had tentacles. Some breathed methane, others lived in water tanks. But today they all came for the same reason. Today marked 847 years since the humans went silent. Ketheva raised her forearms, and the hall grew quiet. Even the translator devices stopped their soft humming. In the perfect silence, she began to speak. My friends, we gather again to remember the day that changed everything. The day we learned that silence can be more terrifying than any scream. In the front rows, the older species nodded. They remembered. Their ancestors had been there when it happened. But in the back, younger beings shifted in their seats. They had heard this story many times, but they never understood why it mattered so much. The galaxy was peaceful now. Trade flowed freely between star systems. Wars had become things of the past. The Galactic Council solved problems with words, not weapons. Life was good for everyone. So why did the Old Ones still fear a species that had been gone for nearly 1,000 years? Ketheva touched a control panel, and the air above her head shimmered. A holographic image appeared, showing a small yellow star with 9 planets circling it. The third planet was blue and green, covered in swirling white clouds. This was their home, she said. The Sol system. Earth was the name of their world. For millions of years, it was just another planet in a quiet corner of the galaxy. We paid it no attention. The image zoomed in on Earth. Cities glowed on the dark side of the planet. Ships moved between the worlds of their system. Everything looked normal and peaceful. But then they discovered faster than light travel. Ketheva continued. And everything changed. She pressed another button. The image changed to show human ships leaving their solar system for the first time. They were crude things compared to the elegant vessels the galaxy used now. They burned chemical fuels and had thick metal hulls. They looked like weapons more than ships. When we first met them, we thought they were just another young species. We had guided many others before. We expected them to be grateful for our wisdom. We expected them to want to learn our peaceful ways. The ambassador paused. She looked out at the crowd, seeing the same confusion on the younger faces that she had felt centuries ago. We were wrong. The hologram changed again. Now it showed the first meeting between humans and the Galactic Council. The human delegation sat on one side of a long table. On the other side sat representatives from a dozen alien species. Admiral Chen Wei led their first diplomatic mission. We thought the meeting would be simple. We would explain how civilized species behave. They would agree to follow our rules. Then we would welcome them into our peaceful galaxy. Ketheva's voice grew darker. Instead, they asked us questions. Terrible questions. They wanted to know why we had stopped growing, why we had stopped exploring, why we had stopped trying to become more than we were. The crowd grew restless. Some of the older beings made sounds of distress. They remembered these questions. They remembered how uncomfortable they had made everyone feel. Admiral Chen looked at our perfect society and called it stagnant. He said we had traded our souls for safety. He said we had become so afraid of conflict that we had forgotten how to truly live. The ambassador pressed another control. The image changed to show human history. Wars raged across continents. Cities burned, but also incredible art was created. Amazing inventions appeared. Humans reached for the stars with desperate hunger. We showed them what civilized species had learned to avoid. We showed them the pain that comes from competition, the suffering that comes from war, the waste that comes from conflict. She paused again, her voice becoming quieter. They called it beautiful. A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. Even now, centuries later, that human response still disturbed them. They said that struggle created strength, that conflict created growth, that the risk of failure made success worth having. They said these things were more important than safety. The hologram shifted to show the council's debate. Representatives from hundreds of species argued for days. Some wanted to help the humans learn better ways. Others wanted to leave them alone. A few wanted to eliminate them entirely. For 50 years, we debated what to do. The humans continued to expand during this time. They built colonies. They explored new worlds. They grew stronger every day. Ketheva's voice became grim, and they fought. They fought among themselves. They fought against the dangers they found. They fought against every obstacle in their path. They never stopped fighting. The image changed to show human colonies scattered across dozens of worlds. Even as they built new cities, they argued with each other. Even as they solved incredible problems, they created new ones. They seemed incapable of the peace that every other species had achieved. Some council members studied them more closely. What they found terrified them. The humans were not just violent by choice. Violence was built into their very nature. They had evolved from predators on a world that wanted to kill them. Fighting was how they survived. The ambassador looked directly at a group of young beings in the back. You must understand, this was not how any of us had developed. We came from worlds where cooperation meant survival, where working together was the only way to live. The idea of a species that grew stronger through conflict was impossible for us to accept. The hologram showed the final council vote. Species after species cast their decision. The result was almost unanimous. We decided to contain them. We built a barrier around their entire solar system. Nothing could get in or out. We told them they could leave only when they had learned to be peaceful like us. The image shifted to show the barrier being constructed. Massive ships surrounded the Sol system, creating an invisible wall that blocked all travel. The humans tried to break through with their ships, but nothing worked. We thought we were being kind. We thought we were giving them time to evolve. We thought they would eventually understand that our way was better. Kethva's voice dropped to almost a whisper. We left them alone for 400 years. We watched from a distance, waiting for them to change. Instead, they became something we never expected. The hologram went dark. The hall fell silent again. But that is a story for tomorrow. Tonight we remember only this. Sometimes the greatest mistake is believing that everyone should be like you. She looked out at the crowd one final time. The humans taught us that lesson. And the price we paid for learning it was higher than any of us imagined. The ambassador stepped down from the podium. The crowd began to file out, some talking quietly among themselves. But many left in silence, thinking about her words. Above them, hidden among the station's communication arrays, the old monitoring equipment still pointed toward an empty patch of space where the Sol system used to be. Every day for 847 years, it had listened for any sign that the humans might return. So far, it had heard only silence. But lately some of the technicians had reported strange readings, brief signals that appeared and vanished too quickly to trace, shadows at the edge of their sensors that might be ships or might be nothing at all. Tonight, as the memorial ended and the station settled into its night cycle, those same sensors detected something new, a faint signal lasting only seconds, broadcasting on frequencies that had been silent for centuries. But by the time anyone noticed, it was gone. Admiral Chen Wei stood at the viewport of the human ship Defiance, watching the alien station grow larger ahead of them. It was beautiful in a way that human architecture never was. Smooth curves and flowing lines made it look more like a work of art than a military base. Soft lights glowed from within its crystal walls. "It looks peaceful," said Captain Martinez, standing beside him. "Too peaceful," Chen replied. "I don't trust anything that perfect." The Admiral was a tall man with graying hair and scars on his hands from his time as a fighter pilot. He had been chosen to lead humanity's first diplomatic mission because of his experience, not because he was diplomatic. Earth's leaders knew they were sending soldiers to talk with aliens, and they wanted their best soldier in charge. "Sir, we're receiving a docking signal," reported the communications officer. "Take us in," Chen ordered, "but keep the weapons ready." "Are you expecting trouble, Admiral?" asked Dr. Sarah Kim, the mission's chief scientist. "I always expect trouble, Doctor. It's kept me alive this long." The Defiance slowly approached the docking bay. Through the transparent walls, they could see dozens of alien species working together. Some looked almost human, while others were so strange that the crew couldn't figure out which end was their head. "My God," whispered Martinez. "How many different species are there?" "According to their initial message, the Galactic Council represents over 3,000 intelligent species," Dr. Kim answered. "We're about to become number 3001. Chen nodded, but his expression remained serious. "Remember, everyone, we're not just representing Earth today, we're representing humanity's future. These beings will decide whether we get to join their club or stay locked in our own backyard." The ship docked with a soft thud. Within minutes, an escort of aliens arrived to guide them to the meeting chamber. The leader was a tall, blue-skinned woman with 4 arms and large dark eyes. She introduced herself as Ambassador Kethva. "Welcome to Proxima Station," she said in perfect English. "We are honored to meet the representatives of humanity." The honor is ours, Chen replied, though his tone was carefully neutral. As they walked through the station's corridors, the human delegation stared in amazement. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. Gardens grew in impossible spirals through the air. Water flowed upward in defiance of gravity. "This is incredible," Dr. Kim whispered. "The technology here is thousands of years ahead of ours." "How long did it take your people to build this?" Chen asked Kethva. "This station is relatively new," she replied. "Only 800 years old. But the techniques we used have been perfected over millennia. 800 years for something they called new." Chen made a mental note of that. The meeting chamber was enormous, with seats arranged in concentric circles. Representatives from dozens of species were already waiting. Chen counted at least 20 different types of beings, from tiny creatures that looked like walking flowers to massive entities that seemed to be made of living stone. "Please, take your seats," Kethva said, gesturing to a section marked with human symbols. An elderly being with tentacles for arms stood up. When he spoke, his words were translated into English by devices built into the chairs. "I am Council Leader Vorthak," he said. "We have brought you here to learn about the galactic community and to determine if humanity is ready to join us." Chen stood up. "We appreciate the invitation, Council Leader, but I have to ask, ready for what exactly?" Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Apparently most species didn't ask questions during their first meeting. "Ready for peace," Vorthak replied. "Ready to put aside the primitive drives that cause suffering. Ready to evolve beyond the need for conflict." "You mean you want us to stop fighting?" Chen said. "Fighting is unnecessary," said another council member, a bird-like creature with silver feathers. "We learned long ago that cooperation brings better results than competition." Chen looked around the chamber. Every being there looked calm, content, and safe. "Too safe. Can I ask you something?" he said. "When was the last time any of your species discovered something truly new? When did you last push beyond what you thought was possible?" The question created uncomfortable silence. Finally, Kethva spoke. "We have achieved everything we need, Admiral Chen. Our civilizations have reached a state of perfect balance. Why would we need to discover more?" "Because that's what life is for," Chen replied. "Growing, learning, becoming more than you were yesterday." Dr. Kim stood up beside him. "Admiral, perhaps we should listen to what they have to teach us." "Of course, Doctor. I'm always willing to learn." Chen turned back to the council. "Show us this perfect balance you've achieved." For the next several hours, the council presented their civilization. They showed how they had eliminated war, poverty, and suffering. They demonstrated technology that could reshape matter at the atomic level. They displayed art that could directly affect emotions. It was impressive. It was also lifeless. "You've solved every problem," Chen said when they finished. "You've answered every question. You've reached the end of the road." "We have achieved perfection," Vorthak said proudly. "No," Chen replied. "You've achieved death. You just don't know it yet." The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. No species had ever responded to their presentation this way. "Explain yourself," demanded the bird-like council member. Chen walked to the center of the chamber. "Look around this room. I see beings from thousands of worlds with millions of years of combined experience. And you know what I don't see? I don't see anyone who looks excited about tomorrow." He gestured to the displays showing their perfect worlds. "Your people are safe. They're comfortable. They're happy. But they're not alive. Not really. They're just maintaining what they already have." "What is wrong with maintaining peace and happiness?" Kethva asked. "Nothing, if that's all you want. But we want more. We want to see what's beyond the next star. We want to solve problems that don't have solutions yet. We want to become something greater than we are today." Captain Martinez stepped forward. "With respect, Council Leader, your civilization reminds me of a museum. Beautiful, perfect, and completely still." Dr. Kim pulled up data on her portable device. "Admiral, their medical technology could eliminate disease on Earth. Their energy systems could end our power problems forever." "At what cost, Doctor?" Chen asked. "They're offering to solve all our problems for us. But solving problems is how we grow. If they do everything for us, what's left for us to do?" The council members looked confused. This wasn't how these meetings usually went. "You could join us in maintaining the peace we have built," suggested Vorthak. "For how long?" Chen asked. 1,000 years? 10,000? What happens when you've maintained everything perfectly for so long that you forget why you wanted it in the first place? The Admiral looked directly at each council member in turn. You want to know if we're ready to join you? Here's my answer, we're not. And we don't want to be. We're still growing. We're still fighting to become better. We're still alive. He paused, letting his words sink in. But here's what worries me about this meeting. You've had this same conversation with 3,000 other species, and every single one of them said yes to your offer. That means either we're completely wrong about everything, or you've been slowly killing the galaxy for millions of years. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Vorthok spoke. We will need time to consider your unique perspective, Admiral Chen. Take all the time you need, Chen replied. We'll be here when you're ready to talk. As the human delegation was escorted back to their ship, Dr. Kim pulled Chen aside. Admiral, do you realize what you just did? You insulted the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. No, Doctor, Chen replied. I told them the truth. Whether they can handle it or not is up to them. That night, as the Defiance waited in orbit around Proxima Station, the Galactic Council began the longest debate in their history. For the first time in millions of years, they had encountered a species that didn't want what they were offering. The question was, what should they do about it? The monitoring station floated in dark space, its sensors pointed toward the barrier that surrounded the Sol system. Inside, Chief Observer Nextari watched the screens that showed what the humans were doing on the other side of the wall. Any changes today? Asked her assistant, a young crystalline named Vextar. Always changes with the humans, Nextari replied without looking away from her displays. The question is whether they're getting better or worse. 50 years had passed since the Galactic Council had voted to contain humanity. The decision hadn't been easy. Half the Council wanted to help them evolve into proper civilized beings. The other half wanted to eliminate them entirely before they became a threat. The compromise was the barrier. Keep them locked in their home system until they learn to behave like proper galactic citizens. Monitor them closely, and remove the barrier when they showed proper progress. Nobody expected it to take this long. Show me the latest construction projects, Nextari ordered. The main screen shifted to show the space around Jupiter. What they saw there defied belief. The humans had built a ring of structures around the entire planet. Not just stations or habitats, but massive industrial complexes that process the gas giant's atmosphere into materials. How are they powering all of this? Vextar asked. They've learned to crack hydrogen atoms for energy, Nextari replied, but not the way we do it. Their method is crude, dangerous, and somehow more efficient than our perfected systems. The image shifted to show Mars. The planet that had once been a dead red world was now covered in green. Clouds swirled in its new atmosphere. Cities dotted its surface like glowing jewels. They terraformed an entire planet in 30 years, Vextar said in amazement. It took the Zephyrians 2,000 years to do the same thing. The Zephyrians did it safely, Nextari pointed out. The humans did it by throwing asteroids at the planet until it had the right atmosphere. Half their terraforming crew died in the process. But it worked. Yes, it worked. That was the problem with humans, Nextari had learned. They accomplished impossible things by methods that should have killed them. They succeeded through approaches that any civilized species would have rejected as too dangerous. The screen shifted again, showing the asteroid belt. What had once been scattered rocks was now an organized collection of habitats and mining stations. The humans had turned the debris of a destroyed planet into homes for millions of their people. Their population has tripled since the barrier went up, Vextar observed. And their technology has advanced at a rate that alarms the Council, Nextari added. Look at this. She brought up a recording from the previous week. It showed a human ship unlike anything they had built before. Instead of metal hulls and chemical rockets, this one seemed to be made of light and moved by bending space around itself. They developed faster than light travel by studying our barrier, Nextari explained. They couldn't break through it, so they learned to understand it. Now they're using those principles to build things we didn't think they were ready for. Are they trying to escape? No, that's what worries me. They could probably break through the barrier now, but they haven't tried. They're using their new technology for something else. The screen shifted to show Earth itself. The homeworld looked different than it had 50 years ago. Cities had grown upward into the sky and downward into the ground. The oceans sparkled with floating platforms. The poles had been covered with massive installations that seemed to be doing something with the planet's magnetic field. What are those? Vextar asked, pointing to the polar installations. We're not sure. Their energy output is enormous, but we can't determine what they're powering. Nextari pulled up another display, this one showing intercepted human communications. Unlike most species, the humans hadn't stopped broadcasting during their isolation. If anything, they communicated more than ever. Listen to this, she said, playing a recorded transmission. A human voice spoke in their strange, emotional language. The translation appeared as text on the screen. Today marks 25 years since the barriers rose. 25 years since the galaxy decided we weren't good enough to join their perfect society. But you know what? I'm starting to think they did us a favor. Another voice joined the first. How do you figure that, Marcus? Think about it. They're out there, sitting in their perfect worlds, maintaining their perfect peace. They've solved all their problems and answered all their questions. They have nothing left to do but exist. And we have everything left to do. Exactly. We're building things they never imagined. We're solving problems they gave up on millions of years ago. We're becoming something new. The recording continued, but Nextari stopped it there. This is what disturbs the council, she told Vextar. They don't sound defeated. They don't sound like they want to change. They sound like they're grateful for being locked up. Maybe isolation is making them crazy. Or maybe it's making them stronger. Nextari pulled up the latest intelligence reports. What they showed was deeply troubling. Human philosophy had changed during their isolation. Instead of trying to become more like the galactic community, they had decided to become more human. They wrote poetry about the beauty of struggle. They created art that celebrated conflict and growth. They developed religions based on the idea that perfection was death, and that only through constant striving could life have meaning. Look at this intercept from last month, Nextari said, displaying another communication. This time, the voice belonged to someone the monitoring station had identified as a human leader. My fellow humans, the galaxy looked at us and saw something frightening. They saw a species that refused to stop growing, stop fighting, stop becoming more than we were. They were right to be afraid. The voice paused, and Nextari could almost feel the passion behind the words. Because we are frightening. Not because we want to hurt anyone, but because we represent something they gave up long ago. We represent the refusal to accept that this is all there is. We represent the belief that tomorrow can be better than today, no matter how good today might be. Another pause. They think they're punishing us by keeping us locked in our own system. They think we'll eventually get tired of being alone and beg to join their static paradise. They're wrong. The voice grew stronger. We're going to use this time to become something they never expected, something they can't understand. And when we're ready, when we've grown into what we're meant to be, we'll show them what they lost when they chose safety over growth. The recording ended in silence. Vexitar stared at the screen. Chief Observer, are they threatening the galaxy? Nextari thought about that question for a long moment. I don't think so. I think they're threatening the galaxy's way of thinking, and that might be worse. She pulled up the latest readings from their deep space sensors. For the past year, they had been detecting strange energy signatures from the inner system. The signals were brief and impossible to trace, but they were growing stronger. What do you think they're building in there? Vextar asked. Something we've never seen before, Nextari replied. Something that's going to change everything. She stood up and walked to the main viewport. Beyond the transparent barrier, the Sol system looked peaceful. But the readings told a different story. Inside that seemingly quiet bubble, humanity was transforming itself into something unprecedented. Send another report to the council, she ordered. Tell them the humans show no signs of accepting our values. If anything, they're moving further away from galactic norms. Should we recommend extending the isolation period? Nextari hesitated. Part of her wanted to say yes. Keep the humans locked up until they learn to behave properly. But another part of her wondered if they were making a terrible mistake. No, she finally said. I think we should recommend a full review of the containment policy. Why? Because I'm starting to think we're not keeping them in that barrier to protect the galaxy from them. I think we're doing it to protect them from us. As the monitoring station continued its silent watch deep inside the Sol system, the humans worked on projects that would have terrified the Galactic Council if they had understood what they were seeing. The barrier that kept humanity contained also kept the galaxy's attention focused outward. None of them noticed that the energy signatures coming from the human system were no longer following known physics. None, of them realized that humanity wasn't just advancing their technology, they were transcending it entirely. Alarm bells screamed through every monitoring station in the galaxy. Emergency lights flashed red as operators rushed to their stations. On the command deck of Station Alpha 9, Commander Thexval stared at readings that made no sense. "Report," he shouted over the noise. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy spikes from the Sol system." His communications officer replied, "The readings are off our scales." "Show me." The main display lit up with a view of the human quarantine zone. The barrier that had contained them for 400 years was still intact, but something was happening inside it. Waves of energy pulsed outward from Earth, hitting the barrier and bouncing back. "What are they doing in there?" demanded Thexval. "Unknown, sir. The energy patterns don't match anything in our databases." Similar scenes played out on monitoring stations across the galaxy. For 4 centuries, the humans had been a minor concern. The Galactic Council checked on them occasionally, like checking on a dangerous animal in a cage. Today that cage was shaking. On Earth, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the control room of Project Transcendence, humanity's greatest and most secret achievement. Around her, hundreds of technicians worked at stations that monitored systems spread across the entire solar system. "Final checks complete," reported her chief engineer. "All stations report ready," Elena nodded. She was old now, one of the last humans who remembered life before the barrier. She had spent her entire career working toward this moment. "Are you sure about this, Director?" asked her assistant. "Once we activate the system, there's no going back." "There was no going back the moment they put us in this cage," Elena replied. "We've spent 400 years preparing for this day. Our children deserve to see what's beyond these walls." She looked at the main display, which showed the current state of humanity. 8 billion people now lived throughout the Sol system. They had built cities in the clouds of Venus, floating habitats around Jupiter, and mining colonies in the asteroid belt. They had turned their prison into a paradise, but it was still a prison. "Initiate the sequence," Elena ordered. Across the solar system, installations that had taken centuries to build came online simultaneously. On Earth, the polar arrays activated, creating a magnetic field that resonated with the planet's core. On Mars, atmospheric processors began generating exotic particles. Around Jupiter, the massive industrial complexes started producing energies that existed only in theory. "Sir, the energy buildup is accelerating," reported the communications officer on Station Alpha 9. "Whatever they're doing, it's affecting space-time itself." Commander Thexval opened a channel to the Galactic Council. "Council Leader Vorthak, we have a situation with the human containment." The ancient being's voice crackled through the speakers. "Explain." "They're doing something that's destabilizing local space. Our instruments can't identify the technology they're using." "Are they trying to break through the barrier?" "No, sir. If anything, they seem to be reinforcing it from the inside." There was a long pause. "Reinforcing it? Why would they do that?" "Unknown, sir. But whatever they're building, it's using more energy than some of our largest civilizations." Back on Earth, Elena watched as the system reached critical mass. 400 years of human ingenuity, compressed into a single moment. They had taken everything the Galactic Council had taught them about advanced technology and pushed it beyond what anyone thought possible. "Director, we're approaching the threshold," her engineer reported. "All stations confirm ready?" "Yes, ma'am." "Humanity is ready." Elena took a deep breath. Around her, her team waited for the order that would change everything. "You know," she said to the room, "the Council thinks they quarantined us to protect the galaxy, but I think they really did it to protect us." "Protect us from what?" her assistant asked. "From becoming something they could never understand." She turned to her chief engineer. "Activate Project Transcendence." The effect was immediate and impossible. Every monitoring station in the galaxy detected the same phenomenon at exactly the same moment. Faster than light could travel, a signal burst outward from the Sol system, reaching every corner of civilized space instantaneously. On Station Alpha 9, the communications officer stared at his instruments in disbelief. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission." "From the humans?" "From everywhere, sir. Every frequency, every channel, every communication system in the galaxy is carrying the same signal." "That's impossible. No technology can broadcast to the entire galaxy simultaneously." "It's happening anyway, sir." Commander Thexval activated the main speakers. The transmission was clear, calm, and spoken in perfect galactic standard. The voice belonged to a human, but it somehow reached every being in the galaxy in their own language. Citizens of the galaxy, the voice began. This is humanity speaking. Across thousands of worlds, billions of beings stopped what they were doing to listen. For 400 years you have kept us isolated from your civilization. You believed we were too violent, too primitive, too dangerous to join your peaceful society. The voice paused, and in that silence, the galaxy held its breath. You were right, another pause. We are dangerous, not because we want to hurt you, but because we represent something you have forgotten. We represent the refusal to accept that this is all there is. We represent the belief that growth matters more than safety. On the monitoring stations, instruments began detecting impossible readings. The barrier around the Sol system was still intact, but the space inside it was changing in ways that defied known physics. We have spent these centuries learning from our isolation. We have grown beyond what you thought possible. We have become something new. The signal grew stronger, as if the entire galaxy was a single receiver tuned to one frequency. And now, we have something to tell you. Elena Vasquez stood at her control station, watching readings that showed the culmination of 4 centuries of human determination. Around her, technicians reported status updates that would have sounded like magic to earlier generations. Dimensional, fold is stable, consciousness, transfer is complete, physical matter conversion at 98%. She nodded and opened the final communication channel. We forgive you. The words echoed across the galaxy with the weight of absolute truth. We understand why you feared us. We understand why you chose safety over growth. We understand why you locked us away. A pause that seemed to last forever. We remember everything. Every slight, every dismissal, every moment of condescension was contained in those words. The galaxy had treated humanity like children, and the children had grown up. See you soon. And then, in an instant that would be remembered for millions of years, the Sol system vanished. On every monitoring station, the readings went to 0. Where a star and 9 planets had existed moments before, there was only empty space. No explosion, no debris, no trace that anything had ever been there. Commander Thexeval stared at the empty void where humanity had lived. Sir, his communications officer whispered. Where did they go? Before anyone could answer, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Strange structures appearing on uninhabited worlds, ships using impossible technology, messages carved into ancient ruins all saying the same thing. We remember everything. The galaxy's greatest fear had come true. They had created something they couldn't control, couldn't understand, and couldn't stop. Humanity had transcended physical existence itself. They had become something that could reshape reality through pure will and determination, and they were coming home, but not as conquerors, as teachers. The galaxy was about to learn what it really meant to be alive. Ambassador Ketheva finished her memorial speech and stepped down from the podium. The crowd of alien delegates began to file out of the Crystal Hall, their conversations hushed and uncertain. For 847 years, this ceremony had been a simple remembrance of the day humanity vanished. Tonight felt different. Ambassador, called a young Zephyrian delegate, do you really believe the humans will return? Ketheva paused, her forearms adjusting the ceremonial robes she wore for these occasions. She was old now, one of the few beings who had actually met humans during the First Contact era. I don't believe they ever left, she replied. Before the delegate could ask what that meant, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the crystal corridors in red, as automated voices announced a priority alert. All delegates to emergency stations. Unknown phenomena detected galaxy-wide. Kethva rushed to the nearest command center, where dozens of technicians were staring at displays that showed impossible readings. Commander Zeftar, the station's military leader, looked up as she entered. Ambassador, we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Structures are appearing on worlds that were empty hours ago. What kind of structures? Unknown. But they're using architecture we've never seen before. The main display showed a feed from the Andromedan colonies. Where there had been bare rock that morning, a city now stood. Not built, but existing as if it had always been there. The buildings seemed to be made of crystallized light, flowing in patterns that hurt to look at directly. How is this possible? Asked one of the technicians. Before anyone could answer, another alarm sounded. This one was different, more urgent. Incoming transmission, reported the communications officer. Source unknown. Signal is appearing simultaneously on all frequencies across the galaxy. Put it through, Commander Zeftar ordered. The voice that filled the command center was unmistakably human, though it seemed to come from everywhere at once. Citizens of the galaxy, we told you we would see you soon. We have kept our promise. On the main screen, images began appearing from worlds across known space. Peaceful agricultural colonies, ancient historical sites, busy trade stations. All of them now showed the same thing. Humans walking among the alien populations. But these weren't the humans the galaxy remembered. They moved with a grace that seemed to bend reality around them. They spoke to each alien in their own language, even species that had never encountered humans before. They seemed to know things that no one had ever told them. We have spent 800 years learning, the voice continued. Not just about technology or science, but about truth. About what it means to be alive in a universe that wants to grow. Kethva stared at the display showing her own homeworld. Humans walked through the streets of the Zephyrian capital. And everywhere they went, something changed. Plants grew taller. Colors became brighter. The very air seemed to shimmer with possibility. What are they doing? Whispered Commander Zeftar. They're reminding us, Kethva said softly. Reminding us of what? Of who we used to be. The transmission continued. You created a peaceful galaxy by forgetting what peace was for. You ended suffering by forgetting what joy felt like. You achieved safety by giving up everything that made safety worth having. Reports flooded in from monitoring stations across space. The humans weren't conquering worlds or destroying civilizations. They were doing something far more disturbing. They were helping. On the war-torn border worlds that the Galactic Council had given up on, humans arrived and simply started talking to both sides. Within hours, conflicts that had raged for centuries began to end, not through force or political manipulation, but through reminding the combatants why they had started fighting in the first place. On worlds where ancient ruins held mysteries that had puzzled archaeologists for millennia, humans appeared and began reading the inscriptions as if they were written in common script. The knowledge they shared revealed histories that changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about itself. We know you're afraid, the human voice said, and somehow each listener felt like it was speaking directly to them. You're afraid that we're here to take revenge for the centuries of isolation. You're afraid that we're here to destroy the peace you've built. Kethva found herself holding her breath. We're not here for revenge. We're here because we discovered something during our isolation that you need to know. The display shifted to show ancient star charts, but not as the galaxy knew them now. These showed the same regions of space as they had been millions of years ago, when young civilizations were just beginning to explore beyond their home worlds. Every species in this galaxy shares the same origin. Every world, every culture, every form of life traces back to the same source. The charts changed, showing migration patterns that spread outward from a central point. That point was labeled with coordinates that every being in the galaxy recognized. The Sol System. You are all human, the voice said simply. Scattered across the stars millions of years ago, evolved into different forms but sharing the same origin, the same potential, the same capacity for growth that you've spent eons trying to suppress. The revelation hit the galaxy like a physical blow. Across thousands of worlds, billions of beings stared at genetic data that proved what the humans claimed. The Zephyrians, the Crystallines, the gas-breathing Vorthali, even the ancient council leaders themselves, all carried genetic markers that traced back to Earth. We didn't just transcend physical existence during our isolation, the voice continued. We transcended time itself. We learned to see the connections that bind all life together. We discovered that the galaxy isn't a collection of separate species sharing space. It's a single family that forgot its own name. Kethva felt tears on her blue cheeks, though she couldn't remember the last time her species had cried. The council that imprisoned us was made up of our own descendants, so far removed from their origins that they feared their own ancestors. You built a perfect, peaceful galaxy by locking away the part of yourselves that remembered how to dream. On worlds across the galaxy, changes were beginning, not forced changes but natural ones. Species that had lived in sterile, controlled environments for millennia suddenly felt the urge to explore again. Artists began creating works that expressed emotions they had forgotten they could feel. Scientists started asking questions that had no guaranteed safe answers. We're not here to rule you or change you, the human voice said. We're here to remind you that you have the choice to change yourselves. The transmission began to fade, but before it ended completely, one final message appeared on every screen in the galaxy. The barrier around Earth is gone. Any who wish to visit their ancestral home are welcome. Come and remember what it feels like to be human. In the command center of the memorial station, Kethva stood in silence as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't returned as conquerors or destroyers. They had returned as family, offering to help their lost relatives remember who they really were. "Ambassador," Commander Zeftar said quietly, "what do we do now?" Kethva looked at the empty space where the Sol system had been for so many centuries. But it wasn't empty anymore. Instruments were detecting familiar readings: a yellow star, 9 planets, and the impossible blue-green world that had given birth to them all. "Now," she said, "we go home." Across the galaxy, ships began changing course toward the Sol system. Not invasion fleets or diplomatic missions, but pilgrims returning to a place they had never been, but somehow remembered. The humans had kept their promise. They had seen the galaxy soon, and in seeing them, the galaxy had finally seen itself. The age of perfect, static peace was ending. The age of growth, struggle, and infinite possibility was beginning again. The children were coming home, and they were bringing their dreams with them. Humanity had saved the galaxy by reminding it how to be human, and this time, they would grow together toward whatever impossible future awaited them among the stars.